the more parents I've been talking to, this transition to adulthood is not well supported in our social system. And it is heavy on the heart of autistic and neurodivergent parents. I know so many parents who are creating jobs for their children. They're opening bakeries and food trucks because no one's going to hire them because they need more support and no one has the patience. So we're creating those opportunities. And that is so beautiful for them to do that. But it's also like, hey, time out. We need to do better. There is an analogy I used to use of like depositing and withdrawing into the bank, right? Like when you deposit the good, the hope, the love, the light, then when you get into these rough spots, you build your bank account that when you have to withdraw, it doesn't break the bank. But if you don't have those opportunities in those moments where you are depositing into this bank of light, that when you withdraw, you just go in negative and you can go into like a dark place.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle Podcast. Now, today is going to be an amazing conversation because we're going to be sitting down with the founder and executive director of Come As You Are, aka CAYA. Now, Jennifer Brooks Kaluza is joining us on the show today. We're going to be talking about not only her story and how she founded CAYA, we're also going to talk about challenges that come along with innovation in the autism support space. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship, advocacy. We're also going to talk about so many things that have made her journey so special and the inspiration behind her amazing organization as well. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. So excited to be here.
So Jen, if I had to ask you a simple question, and maybe you don't get asked this all the time, if you had to describe yourself, but work was not involved in that description whatsoever, how would you describe yourself?
I would say very empathetic, servant, and leadership, and also just from peers that I encounter every day, and hopeful.
Hopeful. That's a really powerful thing to describe ourselves as. I always wonder why we choose to use those words. I was having a conversation a little earlier today with another CEO of an organization called World Reader, and she said that her organization is focusing on being one word. When it comes to being hopeful, what does that mean to you?
It means that there's always another day, that what we're doing right now is not how it has to be done forever, and that there's never a mountain that's too big for you to climb, and that there's always an opportunity to change, to influence change, and to just do things differently.
I love that. You know, what got us here isn't going to get us there. And especially when it comes to, you know, how we tackle challenges, the mindset that comes along with that. The road that we often pick is not the road that we end up on. And I think that's an awesome segue for us to kind of talk about your origin story. So as the founder and executive director of CAYA, I know that this is not where you started. And I think it's really important that we let everybody know your history, your past, some of the other places that you've worked in, and what makes this opportunity so special to you.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned where we end up is not where we start, because where I spent the last 20 years isn't even where I started. So I actually started off in the international relations and diplomacy space. So very committed to our international community piece and different ways to get there. I interned for Lawyers Without Borders. I worked in lobbying in the EU. And when I came back stateside, growing up in Boston, healthcare was something very easy to get into. So I was like, oh, let me get into healthcare while I figure out how to be a diplomat. So for the last 20 years, I've been in the healthcare industry, medical devices, long-term care. And for over the last decade, I've specifically been with Elevance Health, where I focused my career on serving the most vulnerable populations in both Medicaid and Medicare. I led our operation for our Virginia Medicaid health plan, which I think really shaped me for who I am today. I've always been called to serve in my heart. And Unfortunately, being a provider was not in my skill set. So getting into healthcare and getting into managed care, Medicaid specifically, was really filled my cup in so many ways. I remember when we were working with our long-term care population, getting in the car with case managers and driving to people's houses, going to churches. I remember going on the median and the highway, just trying to engage with this population to help them. So I did that for about 5 years. And then for the last 3 years, I went over to the Medicare side of business, where I led some strategy there and also was responsible for our supplemental benefits and execution of those. So when we think about healthcare and really only 10 to 20% happens in a healthcare setting, supplemental benefits are critically important. So people have access to healthy food, have transportation, can pay their utility bills. So it was a lot of fun to do that for the last 3 years at Elevate Health before I left at the end of May to start coming to us.
So let's talk about some of the lessons that we learned. So early in 2014, I started my first business in healthcare. We are a telehealth company trying to increase access to things like mental health services through things like video communication and SMS text. Because one of the things that I recognized about the population specifically here in Nevada is large Medicaid population, very transient, often don't have access to a ton of resources. And I learned that there are so many individuals and pockets of people that are impacted by their social determinants of health when it comes to being able to access a trusted resource, having access to good education, food, transportation, all of these other type of things were huge elements that impact our populations. But I didn't really see that when I thought of healthcare. When you were kind of going down this path over the years, did you learn some lessons and did you have some like aha moments about how vulnerable some of these populations were?
Yeah, I think it was absolutely in the Medicaid side. And I think that Medicaid has been talking about social drivers of health, like these social determinants of health for quite a long time, just based on the population. So, there's nothing more powerful than going into a member's home and what they have, infestation, for example. They have bed bugs, or they don't have any food in their cabinet. And when we start thinking about members on very limited income, when it comes to, are you going to go to the doctors or are you going to feed your family? The choice majority of the time is going to be, I'm going to feed my family. So being with the population, is the only way you can really understand the population, I believe, very firmly. So being with our members and seeing how they live and seeing, the stuff between a rock and a hard place choices that they had to make, really opened, our eyes to how do you address the whole person? How do we wrap around this vulnerable population so they don't feel like they're alone and they're not making these hard choices, and we're helping them live as healthy as possible.
I love that term, the whole person, because forever we always saw healthcare kind of looking at mental health as an example, your physical health, access to resources as separate things. But when we're trying to show up and have a holistic view, if you will, of trying to support an individual, we have to account for all of those different things. And I feel like it's so important to really kind of hit that on today's episode, because your biggest thing that we talked about in our previous kind of conversation was your version of creating CAYA as a holistic support system for autistic individuals. But you also said something about yourself, which I think is important for you to identify. And you said, I am neurodivergent. How do you think that's impacted your perspective of not only kind of how you've been able to navigate through healthcare, your roles, but also why you created CAYA in the first place?
Yeah, a relatively recent discovery for myself internally was how much I've been masking for so much of my life, and feeling like there was something wrong with me. So, for example, in meetings, I get very overstimulated. If someone's talking to my right and someone's talking to my left, my brain shuts down. I can't focus and process any thoughts. So when I started thinking of what do I need? What makes me feel comfortable? Being able to turn to someone and say, hey, I can't process what you're saying right now, has really been powerful. And what I found as I started saying or sharing things about me, I asked a lot of questions, or I need to write things down. I don't process as well audio audio as I do if I'm reading or writing, that, he gives me that grace. And I'm asking questions because I need to really understand every single piece for me to get the big picture. If you try to go from like A to M and then go to Z, I'm not going to be able to follow that. So it was really such a beautiful thing that I saw within my team and other teams as I was sharing my neurodivergent aspects and things that work well for me or not work well for me. I started seeing other people around me open up. And one of the most important things about CAYA and what really makes us different is we talk about community, that we can't change, we can change by ourselves, but the community needs to change. And how do you find your belonging and, don't retreat in isolation and don't have those negative thoughts like I've had of like, what's wrong with me? Why do I think this way? Or why do I think 10 different ways and not just one way? It really starts bringing people together and then feeling comfortable with their.
Oh man. In 2022, the Surgeon General came on to a national broadcast and said that the biggest challenge we face in society today is not another outbreak of a viral pandemic, but an epidemic of isolation and loneliness. And when I think about how we can combat some of those macro issues, it's exactly what you just said. Showing up as the truest versions of ourselves, being vulnerable and authentic enough to say, this is how I am. And it's amazing to see how other people will find their story within yours. So when you've started opening up about some of your, characteristics and how you felt in certain situations, I'm sure that it was scary, but it had to feel incredibly validating for everybody else to say, I feel these type of things too. And it kind of gave you a little bit more bravery to kind of continue to share and open up, and then led to CAYA, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of starts in small pieces, and then it just got bigger and bigger. And, being a senior leader at a Fortune 20 company, it can be scary to share those things. But starting off with, at my team meeting, offering fidget toys or asking people, what's their communication preference? This is how I prefer to communicate. These are things that overwhelm me. How can I help you? It just started like snowballing, and people, I remember one gentleman breaking down in tears in my office saying, I've never felt seen before. No one has ever asked me these questions. And, I, of course, started crying too, because, as a leader and just, I'm here, I truly believe that my calling is to help people find their place. And that was just one of the most remarkable experiences, is having that connection with him.
This is the true definition of leadership, right? Is making other people feel safe, feel seen, and feel validated so they can truly be their best self. One of the things that I think is really interesting when you talk about being a leader in a Fortune 20 system, there's a lot of pressure that comes on you in those situations to act a certain way, to be a certain way. And I couldn't be more proud to sit across from somebody who recognized that if you were going to show up as your best self, you had to show up as your whole self. And you created opportunities for other people to find that inspiration as well. And so I really think it's just important to kind of start off these conversations by sharing our personal stories, because you never know who else is listening, who feels the exact same way, but hasn't had the bravery or the opportunity to open up and be their true self yet. So I just want to say, Jen, thank you for being that person for so many. It really means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the name, Come As You Are, I think, that in itself is a statement to the mission and the, what we value. So, showing up as you are, your whole person, unapologetically, this is who you are. That is my ask for everyone in this world. And to know that with Come As You are going to be embraced with acceptance and love and compassion and empathy, because you're brave for showing up as you are. And those masks that, the autism community wears, a lot of us wear, the detriment that has to your mental health and like, knowing your true self is tremendous. And there's a lot of conversations happening recently about masking. And when I think about CAYA, yes, we're a nonprofit, but I really see it as a movement. And that's really how I want it to be out there in world. Show that you are unapologetically, and let's create the community that embraces you for that.
Let's talk a little bit about the transition from being a leader in a large healthcare system to starting CAYA. Now, I know that you talked about you were, I would say, incredibly supported by the other leaders of your organization who are saying, okay, Jen, we see that you're trying to do something for yourself. Often we don't get the support of people who come from a system like that. So let's kind of talk about the transition, some of the fears or the hesitancies that you might have had to kind of take this big leap and jump over the chasm to say, I'm going to own this movement.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're exactly right. The support I got from Elevance Health was incredible. I'm also on the board of directors for the Autism Society chapter here in my area. So everyone that I worked with knew how important autism is to me, supporting the community and being involved into it. So there really wasn't shock that I was leaving to go do something in the autism space. There was a lot of shock that I was leaving, calling it my retirement. But being very mindful that, this is a step forward. And, I didn't realize at the moment, I was like, I'm going to do this. It's now or never. And if not me, who is really how I thought about it. And just the compassion and the support and the feedback of like, I really admire your courage. And that word courage never occurred to me when I was, going through this really a year-long internal struggle of, how are you going to make this world a better place? I believe I'm here to do something bigger than what I could ever imagine. And while, healthcare gave me so much, there was still more for me to do. And everyone around me just, how can we help? How can we support you? And we hope to see you go. But like, that's just amazing. And that support is what really fueled me. Because as you can imagine, there's lots of doubt and there's a lot of security working at, an organization. And to just say, I'm stepping in a different direction to find a different way to give back. It was met with just wonderful support.
You're the definition of an authentic gangster. Somebody who had an opportunity and then took advantage of it because you felt like there was a bigger mission, which I feel like is so important. I want to talk a little bit about mission. So one of the things that we know about CAYA is that your guys' mission is to empower independence to the autistic individuals through a holistic approach. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? Let's kind of riff on that for a little bit.
Sure. So, there's a lot of great organizations out there that are doing a ton of work working with employers about neuro-inclusive practices, accommodation, and a lot of employers have been very open to that. But when I was looking at, like, why do we still have 80% of the autistic adult population under or unemployed? Why do 80% of autistic adults live with a caregiver? We're clearly missing something. And, what I've learned in my time in healthcare is having a person-centered approach. So when you have a person-centered approach, you're looking at everything. You're looking at their social system. You're looking at their mentors. What are they good at? What makes them uncomfortable? Nothing's done in a silo. So what I saw missing from the current system is when, how are we supporting the individual and not just saying, hey, here's a job. The employer has great neuro-inclusive practices and they want to hire someone on the spectrum. We're just assuming that individual is going to be a good fit because they have autism, when they really need to be supported. So we take a case management like support. So we build what I'm calling an individual independence plan, where we put together short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, milestones. And we talk about, do you know how to ask for accommodations? Do you have transportation to work? Do you know how to make meals for work? How do you deal with workplace conflict? So it's not just throwing it over the fence, like on paper that looks like it should work, but it's really holding a hand and supporting them that for sustainability, and not just get them through the interview process, they make it, but addressing the long-term success so we can really see that change.
And that's what it's all about. It's not about creating an opportunity, but creating a platform for sustainable success. And this is where I think we really need to focus in a lot of our practices. Is just because we have a neuro-inclusive environment or a policy does not mean that the individuals who are coming into this space have all the skill sets and all the tools that they need to succeed. And one of the things I think is also really important for us to talk about here is the importance of independence for people who have been diagnosed with autism or other neurodivergent type of tendencies and diagnosis, right? A lot of the leaders who I speak to on the podcast often talk about serving children, right? Or serving younger populations. But we need to recognize that statistically, 1 in 36 children today are being diagnosed with autism. That means that 1 in 36 adults in the future are going to need platforms, skill sets, and environments that can enable them for independence through holistic views like we're talking about. Why did we focus specifically in this area of services and support? Was it an opportunity that you saw? Was it personal experience? Why don't you let everybody know?
Yeah. So, there's been such a big push, since 2000, the statistics in autism went from like 1 to 200, 1 to 100, and now we're at 1 in 36. It's increased over 300% over the last 24 years. And there's been a great effort for early diagnosis. For me in my situation, my son Charlie, who's my inspiration for CAYA, he's on the spectrum. He was diagnosed at 5, and he was diagnosed through a very roundabout, long process. He actually had a grand mal seizure at Disney when he was 5, which resulted in the SICU and starting neurology. And it was 2 years of just specialists and tests until we finally got the diagnosis at 7 that he had autism. And, it's been a hell of a journey. And, as soon as we got that diagnosis, I was like, okay, I need to know as much as I can, get as involved as I can. And something that was a repeat focus of his was fear of the future. So he knows, like, I'm in school, I'm advocating for him. He has lots of therapies and support, but he's always been worried about what the future looks like with him. And it got worse with every birthday, because he knows that he's getting older, that mom's getting older, which means grandma's getting older, and he knows death happens. So he's been asking me for years, like, Mom, can I live with you forever? And while at 12 years old, as a mom, that's very sweet, and I would love that. I want more for him. And the more parents I've been talking to, this transition to adulthood is not well supported in our social system. And it is heavy on the hearts of autistic and neurodivergent parents. I know so many parents who are creating jobs for their children. They're opening bakeries and food trucks because no one's going to hire them because they need more support, and no one has the patience. So we're creating those opportunities. And that is so beautiful for them to do that. But it's also like, hey, time out. We need to do better. We need to do something. So, Charlie, he falls into the class, is what I call it, because he's not enough of anything. So he's not disabled enough to get Medicaid services, but he's also rejected a lot from neurotypical mainstream because his friends and people call him weird. Like, he doesn't engage well in two-way conversations. He struggles with eye contact. So what do we do when you're not enough of anything? So CAYA, and what I'm really focusing on and what we're focusing on, is building these support that helps them that little extra. Let's take the car ride with them to their first job so they get comfortable with their route. Let's give them a planner. Let's teach them how they advocate for themselves in the workforce. So that's really where we're focusing, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs fail because they try to do too much too quick. And we're really focusing on this minimal support population that we just need a little extra, or maybe a lot extra, but they can do it. They're capable. We just need to help them.
I want to reverse, because you just said something incredibly important for the viewers of today's episode and just in the podcast in general. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have a lot of business leaders, a lot of people who are self-starters here. You said a lot of entrepreneurs fail because they do too much, or they try and do too much. Have you recognized this through some of your, I would say, historic business practices? Because you could have tried to take on the world, right, when we were creating CAYA, but you recognize that there was a single problem that you guys could become very good at solving. Why did you focus on that? I really want you to kind of harp on that for a second, because I think that's really important for the audience.
Yeah, I think, you can't be great at everything. And I want to be really great at it. This is such a need. And there's tremendous work being done, especially if you have Medicaid coverage by the state, at the state level. But this specific population has so much opportunity, but not enough support. So, I respect, the larger Medicaid population that there's a lot of programs on, but that's just not where I thought I could be most impactful. And when I do something, I want to be the best at it, and I want to do the best work possible. And I just didn't think that was somewhere that we could really make the most impact.
I'm inspired because you have the focus that is necessary for sustainable success. One of the things that we deal with a lot as entrepreneurs and as business leaders is we always look for, I would say, instantaneous returns, right? But I've really been trying to focus on trying to build something that will withstand a test of time and will impact as many people as possible. And I realize that when your energy is focused in so many different directions, you can't be very good to solve this problem. And that's something that I've really gone through as kind of a maturity exercise is, first thing, pick one thing to be great at. And you sound like you've done an amazing job of that. But the second thing is extend your time horizon that you're trying to accomplish this goal on. Because when you give yourself more flexibility by saying, I'm going to be doing this for a long time, there's not as much pressure to perform right now. I see you nodding with this for everybody who's not watching today. Why do you kind of nod along with that idea?
It rings true to me so much right now. As CAYA is launching and I'm working with some individuals, and I have so many plans of what does the future of CAYA look like. Being able to give myself grace and patience, and I have to flip the switch, right? I was a leader in a healthcare company, and I was able to drive a lot of work, and now it's not as simple at times to get the work done, and it's an incredibly humbling experience. And to do CAYA right, I have to make sure that the population thinks I'm doing it right. So it's about a continuous feedback of, I have a couple of super users who I run a lot of things by and say, does this program make sense? So, I'm building a 12-week workshop. Like, do these topics make sense? Because I don't know everything. And if I'm not serving the community, I am not accomplishing what it's meant to be.
What you just said is one of the biggest indicators of long-term success, but also perceived agency. When you come across leaders, and I'm just going to level set for everybody who's watching and listening today, when you come across leaders who say, I know everything. Oh, yeah. And, I've done that before. Like, totally not. You don't need to tell me about that. You're missing one of the biggest opportunities to improve your value proposition, your product. And so leaning into super users like Jen has done here to say, does this make sense? To validate it by the people who are actually going to be using your tool is one of the best ways to perfect your value proposition and create the biggest impact. That in itself is such a small little innuendo, but I really wanted to kind of pause and emphasize that. You also said something about giving yourself grace. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about as I continue to build my business, I've been in business now for 10 plus years. I started in July of 2014. Now it's 2024 in August, and that time flies by. But the thing that I've recognized is not the accomplishments along the way, but more so the trajectory that we are on. And so one of the things that I've really been focusing on is, even though I might have not accomplished everything by now, if I give myself, once again, that long enough time horizon, and I combine that with an appropriate trajectory where I'm continuing to climb, this journey that you're on in building CAYA is going to be so fulfilling, not only for yourself, but also for everybody else who you engage with. And I hope that you have enough time while you're doing everything right now to really focus on that, because it's so important. And I wish somebody would have told me that when I really got started by starting my organization.
Yeah. And it's, I consider myself a chaos organizer. And I think lots of my reviews have said that I have tenacity. So I take them for the compliment, but it's interesting when I talk to when I was first building the idea of CAYA and talking to some other nonprofits and organizations in the autism community, that, that could be really hard to do on your own. You might want to like partner with a different nonprofit, like be a special resource within the other nonprofit. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to own it all. And I'm not afraid of things being tough. We've all done a lot of tough things in our lives, and, having the business sense of my career and having the passion and awareness, it is going to be hard, but I'm not afraid of it. And I was ready to do it on my own.
What I think about when I hear people say, I don't know why you'd want to take on that challenge, that's just more validation for me to say that's exactly why we're going to do it, because nobody else is going to take this challenge on. And it's almost like a pat on the back that I need from the fact that you're standing up as a leader who's going to take on this challenge while everybody else kind of cowers away from it. And I'm not speaking negatively about anybody, but I hope that you get that sense of vindication and validation that comes from, you taking on this big, hairy, audacious goal, because it's worth fighting for, and more people really need to take that on. I want to back up a little bit and talk about why you went with the structure of like a nonprofit specifically. So out of all of your business acumen, your experience, why a nonprofit, and how do you think you're going to be able to position that in the future?
I think, being on the board of a nonprofit, and typically when we think about social impact and changes, right, nonprofit is a natural way to go. And being a nonprofit also opens up a lot of doors. So once you have your 501c3 status, there is a plethora of opportunities there for you. And, it's balancing running a business and a nonprofit. So just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you're non-profitable. It just means your money is going back into the business and the mission that you're here to drive and support the business. So I didn't really consider any other opportunities besides the nonprofit, because that just fits so nicely into really the mission and what I want to do with CAYA. And it is a continuous feedback into the community, feedback into the program. And I knew I could be successful at it. And, when you start talking about venture backed and all that, like sometimes you can't, or a lot of times you don't get to play by your own rules, and someone's dictating how money's spent, how things happen. And I feel so strongly about the direction of CAYA and what needs to happen to make the change. I didn't want to have to depend on convincing someone of why something's important. I'd rather have the community tell me why I need to change and what needs to happen for it to be successful than someone who's going to write a check.
I completely agree. That was one of the early lessons that I learned from my father. When we started our first business, we went out and we were thinking about raising capital, and we came to the idea and the understanding that not all money is good money, right? Because when you give up control, right, often other people are going to be making decisions for your business, and it very becomes the fact that the founder, Jen, right, ends up being a long-term, highly glorified, tenured employee underneath somebody else's dictation, and you can't really fulfill on the mission of what you're trying to experience and what you're trying to help other people experience. I want to talk a little bit about seasons. So this is a topic that just popped into my mind while you were talking. You've been through many seasons of your professional development, right? One of the things that I've leaned into is when you're trying to build something great, you're going to go through seasons of sacrifice. And that means work-life balance is sometimes tough to accomplish. I've been messing with the framework of work-life integration, right? Figuring out what that integration process looks like for you in your current season. What is your current season, and what does work-life integration at this point in time look like for you?
Yeah, to be honest, work-life balance has been something I really struggled with for a long time, and led to a lot of, I think, burnout and anxiety of where I was previously. And now when my mission and my work is so closely tied to my personal life, every day I'm working. It feels like, every doctor's appointment I'm at, or every time I'm talking to a neighbor, every time I'm, looking online or writing an email, like it just flows, it integrates to your point into my everyday. But that feeling of having to be on all the time, which is what leads to burnout, I don't feel that way anymore. it's an exciting journey that, autism is a part of our everyday. And, even before CAYA, we talk about autism all the time. It's been important to me that Charlie can advocate for himself. And he can talk about autism and why when he gets a cut, it feels like 100 cuts. But when his brother gets one, he doesn't even realize it, right? So we've already integrated autism so much into our lives, and to now to be like, it almost adds a new excitement to it, because now I'm thinking about autism for the whole community, and I'm seeing opportunities that I really couldn't focus on before. So I have the capacity, the space to really live this together versus having to choose, am I going to, open my laptop at the cross practice, or am I going to, be focused at a doctor's appointment, things like that. It really becomes all in one without the burnout.
And the topic of burnout has been a large conversation over recent years. A lot of people say, I'm burnt out. I don't like doing what I'm doing. I just feel like I don't have a lot of agency in the things that I'm impacting. And this is one of the beauties, but also it can be a double-edged sword of being an entrepreneur on a mission that is so integrated into our lives. There's a concept that I've been playing with called energy drainers and energy adders. Now, energy drainers are the things that take energy away from us. But the biggest focus when you're on a mission of sustainability and that long time horizon is recognizing what are the energy adders that you can focus on in your life that fill you back up, because it's very difficult to pour from an empty cup. When you're spending time with your family, when you can experience these things, we can have these type of conversations and other people can pour admiration into the amazing mission that you're on. Those are all energy adders. And I think it's very difficult to be burnt out when we have the good balance of energy adders in our lives that outweigh the energy depleters, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There is an analogy I used to use of like depositing and withdrawing into the bank, right? Like when you deposit the good, the hope, the love, the light, then when you get into these rough spots, you build your bank account that when you have to withdraw, it doesn't break the bank. But if you don't have those opportunities in those moments where you are depositing into this bank of light, that when you withdraw, you just go in negative and you can go into like a dark place.
That is going to be an amazing clip for the episode. I might even lead with that one. So Jen, you killed that one. That was perfect. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of curiosity. So I believe in our last conversation, I talked about a leader who I admire. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk, goes by Gary V on social media. In 2022, he released a book called 12 and a Half. It's called Leveraging the Emotional Ingredients Necessary for Business Success is the subtitle of this book, right? For everybody who's not watching today. Now, one of the key things that he talks about in this 12 and a half ingredients is the characteristic and the trait of curiosity. How do you think you embody the trait of curiosity as the founder of CAYA and as the mom to an amazing kid? How do you kind of embody that, and how does that impact you every day?
I think I embody it because I never accept an answer for what it is. So what we were talking about earlier is like aim with hope. And I think curiosity and hope go hand in hand. So yes, we've been doing it this way for a long time. No, we don't have any great, state or local supported transition program. But why? Why can't we? Why don't we? Well, can we do things differently? So being curious enough so there isn't any hard yeses or there's no hard no's, that opens up so many doors. And what that gives us is hope, and it gives us possibility.
You're a clip factory today. These are amazing. I mean, the fact that we've been able to get this out of you has been absolutely amazing, Jen. I want to ask you a question. Now, this is a little bit off the framework. What have we not talked about here today that we should be talking about for our audience?
I really want the audience to understand how big of a challenge this is, right? I think hearing 1 in 36 children are diagnosed with autism can be impactful. But when we start thinking about our data is bad in general. So when we start thinking about adulthood, like who's talking about autistic adults? Who's building these programs? Who's helping them figure out, what's next? I mean, if you go into an IEP meeting, they're going to start talking about transitions at the age of 14, but are they talking about transitions in terms of this is how you apply to college? This is how you evaluate schools. This is how you think about what majors you want, or maybe college isn't the place for you. We stop talking about autism really. We keep our autism conversations really to adolescents and youth. And I just want everyone to know that we have this incredible talent pool with they're good at so many things and they're untapped and they're really just need, like I said, just that little something, a little support, some direction. And this world is going to benefit so much from including them in our work, in our lives. The way that they think about things and see things is just so beautiful that we're missing out. We're missing out by not opening ourselves to creating space for them in our lives.
What would a piece of advice be to somebody who is on the edge of taking that jump that you did to start their CAYA, to be able to follow their passion? Because deep down inside of them, they know that they should be doing something that will serve not only themselves, but a bigger community. What would your piece of advice be to somebody who's right on the edge of trying to say, I'm going to make the jump, but I just don't know what to do?
That you can't create space for something new without letting go of something old.
That's amazing. Well, I just want to say, Jen, seriously, for everything that you've done, from sharing your story, talking about the inspirations, talking about the gaps that we're filling, but also taking a holistic approach on how we're going to be able to meet people where they are with the support that they need, is truly an inspiration. I want you to kind of share a little bit more about how we can find more information about CAYA, how can we find more information about your story, where can we follow along? Why don't you use this next couple seconds as a little commercial?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can check us out at www.kayaproject.org. We are on LinkedIn, Come As You Are, and on Instagram, Kaya_project. We are, new and we're starting here. So, lots more to come for sure. But there's resources on our website. We are, like I said, we're new. So donations, more to come on the programs that we're launching. And I'm here with you today, Keaton, and we have some more programs planned for sure. So more to come for CAYA, but that's where you can find us right now.
That's amazing. And the last thing that I want to ask you, as part of our tradition, is our last guest wanted to ask you a question. Now, their question was, in moments of doubt, who do you lean on for support and encouragement? Now, they were asking this in the frame of being a leader of an organization, a founder, a CEO can sometimes feel lonely. So in those moments of doubt, who do you lean on for support and encouragement?
It's my husband, for sure. He is he fills me up when I doubt myself or I have questions, and he's just my biggest cheerleader. So he gives me so much hope, and then the kids gives me all my safety. So the combination of those two,
That's amazing. Well, guys, once again, thank you for tuning in to the Hart Hustle Podcast. Once again, Jen Brooks Kaluza is an amazing leader, leading CAYA, filling gaps, and doing everything that we need to do in order to support the future generations of people who really need our support. Once again, that's been a wrap of the episode. Catch you guys in the next one.